Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take these high-stakes, really confusing administrative burdens and try to turn them into clear, focused, and immediately actionable intelligence. Today, we are wading into a topic that I know on the surface it might sound like the most tedious part of running a healthcare practice. We're talking about lost credentialing applications. But here's the truth. This is not just boring paperwork. For physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech-language pathology clinics, so PT, OT, and SLP, a misplaced packet isn't just an annoyance. It is a critical, high-stakes financial bottleneck that can literally prevent you from getting paid for months of patient care. Our mission today is laser-focused. Based on all the materials we've gathered, we're giving you the definitive shortcut to avoiding that, frustrating limbo of waiting 6 months to bill, and we're providing the rapid recovery steps you need if an application just vanishes into that payer black hole. The goal here is to make sure you protect your cash flow from what are really preventable administrative failures.
And that emphasis on cash flow it's just paramount.
Right.
We really cannot overstate the financial gravity of timely credentialing. If you have a new provider and they're sitting there licensed, ready to treat patients, but they're not credentialed, well, every single service they deliver is a service of delayed reimbursement or, far worse, a permanently denied claim. This administrative lapse, it just immediately hits the clinic's bottom line.
Exactly. And to really cement this idea that preventing a lost application is, in fact, maybe the most crucial revenue protection strategy you have, let's look at the sheer scale of what these administrative hiccups actually cost the system. We have some pretty surprising large numbers from our source material that really show why this matters far beyond just your individual clinic's revenue. Okay, so let's unpack this. The American Hospital Association reported a staggering statistic. Hospitals spent nearly $20 billion in 2022 pursuing denied claims. Now just think about that. That's $20 billion spent on administrative effort trying to claw back money that was already earned.
And a lot of those massive denials, if we drill down, they're not clinical denials. It's not about the quality of care that was provided. They're technical denials, often triggered by administrative hiccups like stalled or lost credentialing status or, just minor errors on the enrollment forms. When we connect this back to an individual clinic, the risk is just massive.
It certainly is. And one key analysis we reviewed focused specifically on denied Medicaid claims. And it found that those losses alone cost providers about 17.4% of their potential revenue.
17%.
Almost 1/5 of your potential earnings, just evaporating because of administrative error.
So what here is profound? These figures really underscore why therapy clinics have to elevate their administrative tracking to the same level of rigorous professionalism as their clinical documentation. This isn't just paperwork. It's protecting, like you said, almost 20% of your business. It means investing in strong therapy credentialing tips, including strict organization, meticulous tracking, and most critically, persistent verification with the payers to avoid those heavy financial losses.
That sets the stage perfectly. So if prevention really is the best medicine, let's dive into the key preventative steps. What has to happen before we even hit the send or mail button? What does the admin team need to do to make this packet bulletproof?
The foundational step is just meticulous pre-submission verification and documentation. This is where most applications die before they even get started. You have to triple check every single detail. Individual and group NPI numbers, state license numbers, taxonomy codes, and just confirming the application is aimed at the right payer portal or the right mailing address.
I want to focus on that NPI confusion for a second. Our sources suggested that one of the most common errors administrators miss is confusing the individual NPI with the group NPI when they're filling out the form. How can clinics simplify that check?
Oh, that simple confusion is a 6-week killer. The insight is that when a clinician is enrolling with a payer, sometimes they need to use their individual NPI, and sometimes they need to link that enrollment to the group NTI that the clinic bills under. The administrator has to reference the payer's specific guidelines for that plan because submitting the wrong one often triggers an automated rejection, which, they won't even tell you about for weeks.
Now, here's where it gets really specific to our audience. Let's talk Medicare forms, because this is a massive pitfall where therapy practices often fall into this sort of gray area. We're talking about the crucial distinction between the CMS 855A, the 855I, and the 835B.
This is a critical administrative hurdle. So if a clinic is submitting for outpatient PT, OT, or SLP services that are part of a larger facility, maybe a hospital-owned outpatient department, Medicare typically treats these as institutional providers.
Okay, institutional.
And if you're an institutional provider, you must use the CMS 855A form.
But I'm hearing a distinction. What if the clinicians are working in a smaller, therapist-owned private practice?
That's the key difference right there. The PT, OT, or SLP clinicians in a true independent private practice setting, they're generally using the CMS 855I for their individual enrollment or the CMS 855B for the group enrollment. Misfiling that form submitting an A when you should have used a B is an immediate non-negotiable delay. Administrators get confused because, well, PT, OT, and SLP services feel inherently individual, but the billing structure sometimes forces them into that institutional category depending on the ownership model.
Okay, so we've confirmed the right form. We've double-checked the NPIs. The next phase is creating that ironclad proof of submission. We need more than just hope, right?
Absolutely. The moment a dispute over receipt or timely processing begins, those documents transition from administrative files to, well, to legal evidence. You have to save a complete, dated, and signed copy of the submission packet, and that includes any internal confirmation numbers.
The sources strongly advise using certified mail for paper submissions and noting the tracking IDs. Or if you're using electronic portals like payors or CAQH, saving those digital confirmation screens. But let's be realistic, in a busy clinic, how practical is it to insist on certified mail for every single submission?
It's not about convenience, it's about risk mitigation. You need a tracking number that links the date, the content, and the destination. So whether that's a certified mail tracking ID, a confirmed fax log, or that application receipt number you get from an electronic system like PICOS, which is the Provider Enrollment Chain and Ownership System, or CAQH, which is the Universal Data Source. You need that tracking ID. It is the only evidence you have that the payer actually received it, and that allows you to hold them accountable later on.
That makes perfect sense. Now, beyond just the submission itself, we can't just sit back and wait passively. What kind of tracking system should a clinic implement?
You cannot wait for the payer to call you. It won't happen. Most insurers operate under the assumption that if they need more info, they'll just quietly stop processing the file. The clinic needs a formal tracking system. It can be a simple spreadsheet or dedicated software, whatever works, but you have to monitor the status. And that system must include calendar reminders to proactively follow up immediately after the payer's expected processing time has passed. Proactively asking, did you receive application X submitted on this date with tracking ID Y is the only way to catch an issue early. A 2-minute phone call now can prevent a 2-month delay later, seriously.
That proactive follow-up is clearly the key differentiator. Now, moving past general administrative rigor, let's look at the unique pitfalls specific to PT, OT, and SLP clinics, because this is where the system gets needlessly complex. We know the standard error is missing signatures, expired licenses. But here's the trap that burns therapy specialists: the separate enrollment requirement. Many specialized programs, especially Medicare Advantage plans, managed care organizations, or certain state Medicaid plans, they require separate enrollments for PT, OT, and SLP services. You can't just assume one combined submission covers the whole clinic under a single umbrella.
That's often because those insurance companies budget and manage utilization for specific specialty provider types differently. So if you are enrolling your group practice, you might need to submit 3 separate applications, one for PT, one for OT, and one for SLP, even though they are all under the same clinic roof. Assuming a combined submission when the payer requires 3 separate ones is just a recipe for delay and claim denial. And this is exactly why checking the insurer's provider manual or contacting their enrollment unit directly is non-negotiable. If you skip that step, you have no recourse.
And there's also the secondary check that often gets overlooked, which is vital for any therapy service that requires a physician's order or a prescriber referral. You have to confirm that the referring physician or ordering professional also has active, current enrollment with that specific payer.
Oh, this is a classic downstream denial. Even if you are perfectly credentialed, if the prescriber isn't credentialed or is using an expired NPI on the order, your claims can still be denied. It's for non-covered services from the referring party. It creates this massive administrative burden that is completely outside the clinic's control, yet it's entirely the clinic's problem to solve.
Okay, so if we are operating with this level of administrative rigor, what documentation needs to be kept on file to fight these inevitable challenges? You mentioned keeping records as legal evidence. What does that packet actually look like?
It has to be treated like a tax audit file. You need a complete copy of the submitted application and every single attachment, all current licenses, the W-9, malpractice coverage documents, tax ID info, the entire packet. But just as importantly, you need the log of correspondence. That means the date submitted, the tracking numbers, and meticulous notes from all communication. Emails, fax logs, and detailed notes from phone calls, including the name of the payer rep and the time and date of the call. This is the evidence you rely on if the payer claims they never received your application or that you were unresponsive.
That level of detail seems exhausting, but absolutely necessary. So let's assume the worst-case scenario. We did everything right, certified mail, logged a tracking ID, checked the 855 form, but despite weeks of waiting and proactive calls, the application is confirmed lost or stalled, or they just have no record of it. What are the immediate, non-panic recovery steps?
Act quickly and calmly. The moment you confirm or even strongly suspect it's lost, you have to initiate the recovery process immediately because that clock is always ticking against your revenue.
So step one is immediate contact. Call the insurer's provider relations or credentialing department. You need to reference the original submission date and method and ask for a status confirmation. If you don't get a clear, traceable answer, you immediately ask to speak with the supervisor. Or you send a formal written request, ideally to a specific email address, just to document the inquiry. You need a paper trail confirming the lack of status.
And if it is confirmed lost, the most vital immediate action is to resubmit. Resend the entire packet right away, but, and this is key, include a cover note referencing your original attempt, the date of the lost submission, and the tracking ID of that first packet.
That time factor is so crucial because many payers will reset the application date to when they receive the new replacement packet. So earlier resubmission means your effective date of coverage will be earlier, allowing you to start billing sooner. Every day you delay resending is a day of income lost permanently or pushed months into the future.
And if the payer remains unresponsive even after you've resubmitted, which unfortunately does happen, this is when escalation becomes necessary. If you're dealing with government programs, you can escalate the issue to state Medicaid or the Medicare regional offices. Some states, because they recognize the financial burden on providers, actually allow clinics to appeal in writing for expedited enrollment review if they can demonstrate unreasonable delay. And you use those meticulously kept correspondence logs as your evidence.
And once that enrollment is finally approved, there is a critical step for recovering revenue you couldn't bill during the delay, which is checking for retro billing options. This isn't automatic, is it?
Absolutely not automatic. Once enrollment is finalized and you have an effective date, providers must immediately go back and resubmit any claims that were denied for lack of credentialing during that delay period. This is often called working your denials file. We saw examples in our source material, like Louisiana's Medicaid, that explicitly instruct providers to resubmit previously denied claims. You have to use that retro billing window, which can be short, to recover that lost income.
Let's hit the timeline reality check. We've done all this rigor, but what is the actual realistic waiting time? We can't promise approval in 2 weeks.
No, the industry standard is frustratingly slow. You should allow a minimum of 2 to 3 months from the date of submission to final approval in most cases. Large applications, like those for Medicare or state Medicaid, they frequently exceed 65 days and can easily stretch into 4 months depending on backlogs.
So best practice, if you are onboarding a new provider, is to submit that application at least 3 to 4 months before you need that provider to be fully credentialed and billing patients. That time buffer needs to be built into your hiring process.
It needs to be mandatory. And if you're concerned about initial receipt, which you always should be, always call the Payors Provider Enrollment Hotline or check its online portal after just a week or two. Don't wait for the approval letter. Wait for confirmation of receipt and an application ID number that confirms they're actually processing the file.
And what happens if you get a response, but the insurer claims the application is incomplete? This is another huge clock killer.
It is, but it's often fixable without a full restart. If that happens, you need to immediately ask exactly which specific document or data point is missing or incorrect. And crucially, ask, will supplying this missing piece allow processing to resume, or will the entire clock reset? The goal is to quickly supply the missing item. If you can get that piece in within, say, 48 hours, some payers will allow the process to resume where it left off, rather than forcing you to start the entire 3-month wait over again.
So what does this all mean for the clinic owner and the administrative staff who are tasked with managing this mountain of paperwork?
It means success in therapy credentialing is a dynamic two-part combination. Part one is technical prevention, that's strict organization and documentation of every detail we talked about. Part two is active, persistent communication with payors. You have to operate under the assumption that they will not help you, and you must relentlessly chase them for receipt confirmation and status updates. That active persistence is the only defense you have against system failure.
That active persistence is clearly the key differentiator between waiting 6 weeks and waiting 6 months. The administrative rigor has to equal the clinical rigor. We've covered a tremendous amount of detail today, diving deep into identifying the financial stakes, detailed documentation, understanding that difference between the CMS 855A and the IB forms based on your clinic structure. We've also touched on avoiding specialty-specific pitfalls like separate PT, OT, and SLP enrollment requirements, and implementing swift recovery strategies, including leveraging those retro-billing options to recover lost revenue. Our source materials made it crystal clear that delayed credentialing costs the healthcare system billions of dollars annually, and it severely impedes the cash flow of individual clinics. This leaves us with a provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. If the failure to process applications smoothly creates such massive financial friction in the entire healthcare system, is the core problem truly an individual clinic's documentation issue? Or is it a fundamental friction point in the payer-provider administrative system that clinics must adapt to by treating this intense administrative tracking with the exact same rigor as life-saving patient care?
A critical distinction that really demands a change in operational mindset across the industry.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. Now go apply this knowledge and protect your revenue stream.